Hello there, welcome back to another series of shows. These ones will be up a bit late this week, probably. I'm waiting on my a new router, so I'm recording these shows and hoping to go up soon. Because my router's gone, I'm waiting on a new one, so I'm trying to avoid uploading too much stuff till, because my router I've got is going to collapse any second. So hopefully you'll see them these this week. So I'm going to start off with a double bill. There's going to be quite a few double bills this week. It just does some films that have links that I think are quite interesting, so I'm doing double bills to them. The first one is 300 and 800, which have tied not only their titles, but what kind of films they are and how different they are and how same they are. And they're both massively stupid films in some ways, but they're both well done in other ways. It's a very complicated thing. But the 300 is kind of knowingly stupid compared to the 800, which is a big difference. They're both based in history, but they both use propaganda, And so it's you shouldn't take them as pure history, pure objective history, either of them. They're not, neither of them are. But 300 is much more obvious about myth-making. Well, the 800 is trying to be more respectful, but still doing the same things as 300 does. So that's why I'm linking them. So 300 is the Zack Snyder film from 2006, while the 800 is from Guan Hu, and it was 2020 it was made, so it's just a new release. It's one of the biggest grossing films in China, 2020. And that's because of the pandemic, one of the highest grossing films of last year worldwide. So it was a big hit. It made its money, but it has a lot of problems. And I had it recommended to me by Carl from Into the Blue. Not your best recommendation, Carl. I'm going to say it right now. Yeah. You recommended a lot of good films so far, but this was not one of them. Right, so I'll start with 300. 300 is the easiest one to explain. It's one we'll probably all know pretty well. 300 is basically, takes place in ancient Greece. The Persians are trying to rule the world. They're trying to spread over all different kingdoms. They're attacking Greece after taking out most of their own region, and Greece is the next step towards world domination. And basically this is them taking on the Spartans, who are, the warrior race of Greece. You have the Spartans on one side and you've got the Athenians on the other side. Athens is more about culture and thought, and Sparta is much more militaristic and right-wing, and it's all about surviving the wilderness and being a man and being a real hero, and it's very macho state of affairs. So it's based on a story by Frank Miller, an adaptation of Frank Miller of this myth of the 300 Spartans who took on the entire Persian army and trounced them for a while, and inspired the rest of Greece to rise up and take on the Persians. So that's the general story. So it's about the 300 going based on a suicide run to give faith to anyone else. And the 800 is kind of similar. It's 800 basically takes place in China, and it's about these people, these soldiers trapped in this warehouse in Shanghai, and they're basically defending the Free State, and they're trying to prove that the Japanese can be defeated and they can be trashed. And this is after most of Shanghai has already been destroyed over months of fighting, and China seems to be falling back, and they don't have a good military force. Well, Japan has become a expert military force, and this is the Japanese expansion into all of Asia, basically. So that's the two things. They're both dealing with expansion armies, and both trying to inspire their own people to be brave, really. Now, 300 is a Zack Snyder mega production based on a Frank Miller mega production comic based on history. So Frank Miller, this was Frank Miller when he was going a bit mad. Really, this was not Dark Knight Returns of Frank Miller. This was Frank Miller kind of had his peak and was starting to go a bit kind of crazy. And this one is a much more militaristic joy of murder and death type of thing. This is a real over the top sensationalistic story, but it's still enjoyable. It's not like the anti-Muslim stuff in the 2000s after 9/11. It still had something to recommend it. It still was enjoyable, even though it was a bit, a nod to fascism type of thing. There was that there. Thankfully, Zack Snyder's directing it, so he brings a lot more style to it, so that you can just accept it as an enjoyable piece of nonsense based in history, rather than taking it too seriously. I mean, Zack Snyder as a director, especially in this time, there was an element of camp to what he was doing. I'm not sure if it was intentional. There is just an element to his filmmaking. It's a bit over the top. I think it's genuine based on his beliefs, but it comes across as a bit campy and a bit OTT, and he loves slow motion. He loves, just generally heightened emotion with the visuals and the story. He is, I think, very influenced by Brian De Palma and the slow motion period of Brian De Palma and all the kind of extended things where a lot of stuff went at the same time and everything in slow motion. He seems inspired by that. He's also inspired by the Wachowskis with The Matrix and all that stuff as well. I mean, this film is made by someone who's seen The Matrix too many times. There's way too much slow-mo, it's way too much stuff that feels very Matrixy. It's less annoying now though, because at the time it was annoying because we were getting too much Matrixy stuff. Now you can look back and that's one of the better versions that were influenced by the Matrix. This was at least genuinely made by someone who was into this kind of thing, and you just had a similar style. But at the time it was like, God, that's another Wachowski ripoff. At least for me it was. But actually, Zack Snyder's a saving grace in this film because he plays up the story, but he overplays it to a degree that you're enjoying the ridiculousness of it. That you don't have to take the Frank Miller stuff too seriously. It's not like you're watching it thinking this is like a thumping ode to whatever Frank Miller likes. This is not a spirit. This is much more like Sin City, in a sense, where this came out just after Sin City as well. I think Sin City probably helped it get made because Sin City was a big hit. And just this feeling of, it was like Frank Miller stuff, it was taken seriously, but it was also taken with some humour involved here that we can enjoy. It's probably one of Gerard Butler's best performances because he knows exactly what he's in. He's in a big nonsense film. He's got people like Michael Fassbender before Fassbender became famous. You have a bunch of people from Lord of the Rings and stuff. You have lots of people who you'll know the faces, but you don't quite know the name. They've got a mutant who betrays them, and there's all this stuff about how the warrior class believes and how corrupt it can be as well. And they have a warrior class, but they actually have been corrupted by their own superstitions and their own sense of sin, and how everything can get paid off. So that even if you're a king, like Gerard Butler's character is, you can get limited by the politics. Which kind of works. It's kind of like the Star Wars prequels and Matrix sequels in a way that the politics scenes of the stuff you think, get back to the action. Just get back to the action. And it's actually less complicated than those two films. Those two films had ideas in those scenes that maybe weren't the best executed, but they were more interesting than what we get here. This is just pretty much, you're just basically, Dominic West is the villain and Lena Headey's the wife of Gerard Butler, and you're waiting for her to basically kill him. That's it. That's what you're waiting for. What you're basically looking forward to is the action scenes where Gerard Butler and his guys fight off army upon army of Persians in different ways. There were all these weird tactics so that the Persians are always like at a loss because they've always they basically force the Persians into this one area, so they can only attack them one by one basically, so they can take them out one by one and just keep going because there's no way around this pass. So that's how the 300 actually succeed, because by being better soldiers than anyone else. That was the idea. And the film is best to be seen like on a big screen or projected. on a small screen TV, it is kind of nonsense, and you kind of the nonsense part comes out more. The scenes when the political scenes become a bit overbearing, and the bigger screen, the political scenes you can ignore, and the big action scenes are what you're really enjoying because they are very imaginative. They are based on visuals that are into having an impact, and they're pretty much based on every like version of like it's basically what the film you thought Conan the Barbarian was going to be, or one of those sword and sorcery epics from the 80s. This is the film you thought you were watching in the 80s. You know, for all the action, they're doing stuff. They're throwing elephants off cliffs. They're destroying people one after another. It's visually beautiful, and the violence is wonderfully over the top and ridiculous, and that's why it's hard to take seriously. But it is an idea about them creating a myth that will inspire the people, and because they don't overdo it, it works. So the only person, the narrator tells the story, and he overdoes it a little bit, but the actor knows what he's doing, so he knows he's meant to be given a bit too much, and that's part of the fun of it. So they hire someone who knows to do it, how to do that kind of thing. It's like, yeah, it's over the top, and it is a bit campy, but it's just the right side of knowing. It's not like you're not really trailing someone that you should really believe all this stuff. This is just for the film. This is the myth making the film. This is enjoyable. So yeah, 300 is enjoyable nonsense. It really is. It's beautiful to watch. It's like saying, it's again, on a big screen it's much better because the visuals, I think Zack Snyder is one of the directors, it's much better to see his film on the bigger screen because he kind of builds them for that. He doesn't really build films for a small screen. Small screen, they tend to become like compressed and, you know, just the idiocy of some of the plotting comes more apart because Zack Snyder's not that interested in plotting. If you look at Batman v Superman, the plot is the least interesting thing in that film. It's much more operatic. He's an opera director. He's operatic. That's what he's doing. That's why Justice League, the long version, worked as an opera. You know, so is Man of Steel. So is Batman v Superman. So is this one. They're all kind of operas. He's an opera director, basically, in film. Sort of like De Palma. That's the thing is like, De Palma's more satirical. And more mocking of the mechanics of the operatics. But they're both very operatic directors, and they like that. So you should just go along with that, and that's what their style is. So I've actually become much more of a Zack Snyder fan recently, basically because I've seen enough of his films now. I'm used to what he's up to, and it's like, well, that's what he is, you know. Before it was a bit annoying, but now I've kind of figured out his style, so it's fine. It's just he's not the top level director, but he's enjoyable, like sub-Wachowski level. Wachowski's are more interesting than he is, but he's kind of obviously inspired by some of the similar things in them. But he's not as interesting. But it's still fun. I mean, the Watchmen film is still a problem, especially compared to the TV show. But it's still enjoyable in some ways. So, that's the 300. Now we go to the 800. The 800 is interesting because it is propaganda from China. It's a propaganda film. But it doesn't start out that way. It starts out the way as showing you these four basic deserters who are stuck in this big warehouse, who are basically treated as scum because they want to get escape. And you can see why they want to escape, because this is a suicide run against the Japanese who have invaded Shanghai. And there's only 800 troops left in this one warehouse to protect Shanghai. And everyone thinks it's a lost cause. Like, no one believes it's going to work. It's like, we're all going to die. And we're just hoping to survive a few hours. That's what their basic feeling is. If we can survive tonight, maybe something will happen tomorrow. If we survive tomorrow, maybe something will happen the next day. It's just that thing of constantly trying to survive. And the first hour focuses on that. And the first hour is really enjoyable. The first hour is like hell on earth. These people within landscape that is very yellowy and weird and stylized, but it's also got some realism involved when you go inside the place. And they've also got this weird situation where the opposite is the international zone, the Shanghai International Zone, which you might recognise from Empire of the Sun, because that dealt with that as well. And these people are not going to invade it, but the area that's outside their zone where the soldiers are can be. So basically, no soldier can cross over to the international zone to hide. So they have to survive the backs against the wall against all this Japanese army, and they have to keep fighting and keep stealing the guns and ammo of the Japanese soldiers they kill because they're running low on ammo and they're running low on food, and it's in communication and everything else, and they're just having a hellish time. And their own people are pretty brutal towards deserters. It's like, should we just shoot them? You know, to save food. And they do not want anything to do with these guys. These guys are scum to them. And you watch the four people. One of them is a little brother, and his little brother becomes a runner in the army. And you just watch them surviving. You see them slowly turning from traitors or deserters to becoming full-blown soldiers again, apart from one. One of them remains a coward. But the rest become born again, basically. So the first half, when you've seen them in cowards, is the more interesting part because they have very good reasons to be cowards. This is just insane. Most people stuck in that situation were like, I'm getting the hell out of here. It's like, it's completely reasonable why you'd want to leave because there's no hope. The Chinese army's been proven to be useless. The Japanese are just a massive wave of nastiness come across the land because they are militaristic, they are cruel, they do not care, you know, and they're heading to Nanjing, which was the location of City of Life and Death, which is a much better film. So that's one of the reasons why I watched this, because I've just seen City of Life and Death. And City of Life and Death is so far superior to this film. But the first half of the film is good. The first half of the film is the first couple of raids. There's a really good raid where they send in the Japanese killers who are silent, basically they're kind of ninja class, to start stabbing people. And one of the soldiers who was trying to escape at that time, trying to desert, gives a warning. So even though he saves everybody, they never knew he was trying to run away. So he gets a shit duty anyway after that. That kind of stuff is really cool, because that kind of detail was really fun. So he's mocked for even saving them because he was obviously a traitor. That stuff is really human, and you really can empathise with a lot of the decisions made, and you can sense that you'd be doing the same thing in their situation. You'd just be like, and a lot of people are just there. A lot of the soldiers who are loyal, you're not sure if they're loyal because there's no escape, or they're loyal for their own reasons, they're loyal to communism or something. You don't really know. And it's just a situation where people are trying to survive. And you see a lot of people in Shanghai, and Shanghai's a very capitalistic system. There's lots going on there. People are making a lot of money there. So a lot of the people there are not the average Chinese person. A lot of them are successful, but as the film goes on, they become loyal to the idea of China. And for me, that's the film falls down because it becomes propaganda. It becomes literal propaganda for China in the second half of the film, in a way that's not genuine. It is a propaganda piece. In City of Life and Death, the horrors they face was always human, and you never felt you were getting like something from the Communist Party of China telling you this is the way to be. And this one, the more you go on, the people become less like people, because you engage with them as people to start with, and then as they become more involved in protecting the warehouse, they become much more like idealized citizens and less people. And you start to disengage from any of the characters you're following, because it's like you feel you're getting this shoved in your throat that the individual doesn't matter, it's the people going on that matters, and all these individualists fall to the core of what the Communist Party wants of them, and what the China wants of them especially. So it's propaganda, but it's not like the West hasn't done that a million times. Look at something like John Ford films, a lot of American films. I mean, this film seems to be almost like the Communist version of Michael Bay movie in the second half, where there's lots of flags, lots of sacrifices for the flag, without any real look at what it means. It's just like the fetishization of all these objects of flags and of honor, talking about honor, even though it's not really investigated in any real substantial way, it becomes like an advert for the Communist Party of China. And becomes far less interesting. All the characters suddenly become loyalists to this cause. I said, we've seen it before, Britain still has a problem nostalgia towards its past. You know, and it has all these old shows that are so nostalgic to the past that it's pretty sickening. So, I mean, I'm not elevating us above that. I'm not elevating America above this. I mean, a lot of big countries do this. Russia does it with some of the other stuff. China's now into the kind of garbagey nationalist shit. It's just terrible stuff. It's almost like the worst part of any culture since they do this. And you know, especially since China made a great version of this 10 years before. It's like, this is a massive step back, you know. And it because the first half does what a lot of Chinese films have done really well recently, which is a lot of character pieces within China, showing people in China, actually showing them as people rather than stooges of the government. It actually shows the problems of Chinese people on average. It's just the same as any other country. You know, you watch a lot of films from China, you see that a lot, and now in this one it's just propagandist, and it's like, oh, this is tacky. And yeah, I mean, it's like, you expect someone to go Rambo and yell at the flag or something, because it's so ridiculous in the second half, even though it's based in history. But it feels like Pearl Harbor, where it's like, this is too comic booky to really be a proper account of history. This does not take into account the fear that people went through and the bravery that people went through there. It just fetishizes them so badly. It's like, which is annoying because the first half didn't do that. And the first half showed them as humans. They weren't the deepest characters, but you saw the characters. And then the second half, it was just like, no, we're just going to go into Fantasyland now and flag waving and all this garbage. And it's like, I was enjoying this film and it utterly blew it in the second half. It just became like mindless. It's just a mindless film. You know, as mindless as any American propaganda stuff. I mean, there was stuff in the 50s and 60s in America were just as bad as this. You know, just as embarrassing. The anti-communist things and stuff, and it's like, both sides can just be as embarrassed as each other, really. So I'm hoping this is just an aberration, but I'm guessing it's not. I'm guessing they're going to go in this direction since this film made a lot of money. And it's just like, there's so much imagery of stuff you've seen in the ads. It's like, do people go for a fall for this? Probably, yeah, but it doesn't make a good film. It makes a pretty trashy film on an important subject. Because the subject is so good. It's like, the subject itself said everything anyone wanted to see about the subject, about how brave they were. You didn't need to do any of this flag waving stuff. All you had to do was tell the story. And it would have made the point for you. You didn't need to do anything. Because the point was, these people were brave, and they fought, and they helped raise the country back upwards from the sacrifice. You could do it in a very simple way they did in the first half of the film, and the point would have been made a lot more powerful. Instead, they got scared and just did all this flag waving stuff, and it became just this mess of a second half of a film. It just was constantly trashing what it was trying to do, because it was that great story where everything was that implicit in the story. You didn't have to stylize anything, and the story would have carried you. But instead, they had to go way over the top. So basically, watch 300 over the 800. 300 is ridiculous, but knows it. The 800 is ridiculous, but thinks it's making an important point, and is actually just crapping on its own history. So that's my look at both these films. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Right, bye for now.